This episode is brought to you by DirecTV Stream. DirecTV Stream is your home for baseball. With the most regional sports networks of any streaming TV provider, DirecTV Stream gives you the most local baseball games. And that means more doubleheaders, triple plays, and no-hitters from your local team. Watch this season's action on DirecTV Stream. Get the best of live TV and on-demand at directtv.com/baseball. Regional sports networks are available with choice package or higher and may vary by zip code and package. Not available in all areas. Compatible device required.
Empire.
Hello and welcome to my podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to the John Com Report wherever you get your podcasts. And you can subscribe to us on YouTube at Empire Media, A-M-P-I-R-E. It would be much appreciated. Today, I'm joined by the voice of the Washington Commanders, Bram Weinstein, as we discuss Washington's first-round pick, Jahan Dotson, whom they selected with the 16th overall choice in the first round. You can follow Bram on Twitter at RealBramW, and you can read my analysis of the pick on ESPN.com, and I'll have analysis of every pick throughout the draft. Before I play my conversation with Bram, a couple thoughts. I knew they always liked Dotson. I know this was a surprise pick, but I'd heard his name whenever I discussed receivers with them, and there were a few times I mentioned that if they traded back, he would be a target. But I thought 16 was going to be high for him. I thought if they traded in the 20s, that he would be the target. When they traded back and they're at 16 and he was on there, I think they're going to take him there. But in looking at the other names available, I'm not sure who I would have taken instead. I like Jahan Dotson. Wasn't sure how much they liked him. I knew they liked him more. I knew they liked Dotson more than Treylon Burks, so that wasn't the option. I felt like they felt there was a gap there. So it wasn't like it was close. I felt like they felt like that there were four receivers in the first round they really liked. Dotson was the fourth. I know they liked Tulsa's Tyler Smith at tackle. They had hoped he'd be there around at 47. Instead, he went late in the first round. I know they had other targets in rounds 2 and 4 they liked, so trading back out of 11 and adding more picks is a big win. They added another pick in the third and another pick in the fourth, so they have a pick in the second, 1 in the third, and 2 in the fourth. That is excellent, and to me, that classifies again as a big win. I like what Dotson can do. And I like that he was a one-man receiving show at Penn State. As an Ohio State fan, he was the one that you always worried about. I like that he can make contested catches, and they had to work hard at Penn State because he didn't have a lot of help around him. It's something that Ron Rivera brought up as well, but it's true. You look at the quarterback play there, it wasn't great. Didn't have a lot of other receivers. Didn't have a lot around him like some other guys did. There's still questions about this receiving group, though. Dotson, obviously unproven, as is any rookie, and there's going to be questions about his strength until he goes out there and shows it. Curtis Samuel, coming off an injury, though we know that they really, really like him. De'Ami Brown, a lot to prove. Obviously, Terry McLaurin is the one we know what he'll do. But what Watson does help them with is versatility. Each of those receivers can line up anywhere and run routes. Dotson can line up inside or outside. Samuel can do the same, plus run routes out of the backfield. McLaurin has run routes from all over as well. That will help open up the playbook if this all goes well. And you've heard that before, which it too often has not. But the ability to also run 4 receiver sets is big for them. I know it's something they wanted to do. It's not something they felt they could do with much efficiency last season. But the potential will be there for that in 2022. You can pair the speed with a big body tight end in Logan Thomas. Put Samuel in the backfield with that group. Again, I know you heard a lot about such possibilities last year. You got tired of hearing about it. I got tired of talking about it, especially when it did pan out. You will hear about them again. They have to produce this time. I wasn't surprised that they passed on Kyle Hamilton. I like him. I know they want to fill that Buffalo nickel role. But I also know there are others they feel can play there in this draft. It could be Penn State's Jaquan Brisker. It could be Montana State linebacker Troy Anderson. There are other linebackers they like as well for that role, other safeties. It doesn't have to be a safety. It can be a linebacker who fills it, which is why I mentioned Anderson, and I've done it before. Again, take the clues from Rivera. He has said in Carolina they used a linebacker at times in that Buffalo nickel role. They happened to use a safety last year in Landon Collins. It just has to be somebody who has the versatility to play multiple spots within that package. I also thought it was interesting that General Manager Martin Mayhew said they had 3 offers to trade back one more time when they were at 16, but they decided not to risk losing a receiver that they liked. Again, he was one of 4 they liked in the first round. I know some will say Dotson went too high. In fact, he said he thought he'd go late first or maybe early second. I thought he'd go around 20, but we also heard with this draft that the boards could differ wildly. Was he picked too high? Maybe, but we'll see what he does on the field this fall, and then we'll have the answer. That's it from me. After this break, I'll be back with the voice of the Washington Commanders, Bram Weinstein, as we discuss Jahan Dotson, Washington's first-round pick. Welcome back. Now here's my conversation with the voice of the Washington Commanders, Bram Weinstein. Bram, a little bit of a surprise here tonight with Jahan Dotson at the 16th pick after they traded back. Your initial reaction?
I'm not surprised they traded back. I think that was kind of a goal. They had, they weren't really, I think there were so many directions they could have gone, right? That, the smoke screens that were put up were just kind of naturally and organically there. So when they did talk about what they were going to do, I felt like they were being honest. They were going to wait and see how the board fell, and then they'd make a decision. I thought it was ironic that at 11 they traded out and Chris Olave was picked. Yeah, who was the guy who that started the first. If they do take a receiver, they really like this guy because there's pictures of Ron Rivera practically hugging him at the Ohio State Pro Day, and he really likes him. And so I thought that was really ironic that they traded out, and that's the exact person who was taken. Yeah. And I just think, in general, this wasn't a name that was prominently circulated on mock draft boards or all that stuff or earmarked for them. So I think it was a little bit of a surprise for sure.
And as I told you before you got on here, his was a name I always heard throughout this process, that there were 4 receivers they liked in the first round. He was the 4th one. So when they traded back, I figured this is the guy they're going to go after. I still am surprised, though, at 16. And even he said he was surprised to go at 16. So do you we'll talk about first of all, do you like the value of picking him there?
I do like that they got more assets back. I felt like it was logical for them to move back. I think what it reads now is if Drake London was there, I think they would have taken him.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah. And because he wasn't, at that point, because obviously we were wrong about Olave, they could have just taken him. Obviously we were wrong about Jameson Williams. They could have just taken him, and they didn't do that. So it does appear now, they'd have to tell us this, that if Drake London was there at 11, they would have been happy to stay, and they would have taken him. And because he wasn't and was selected, they now had a decision to make. But they've been kind of earmarking offense and repetitively saying that they wanted to get playmakers for Carson Wentz and build up his confidence and show him that they're committed to putting, explosive players on the field. And this is the guy that they targeted. I did find it interesting that they said we could have traded back again. Now, They weren't specific about that, because to your point, it does feel like they probably could have gotten him a little bit later. Would have been risky, because I'm all for you take the guy you want when he's available to you. And that's what they did. And I don't fault them for that, but I'd have to hear out how far more back were they going to go? How many more assets were they going to get? Was this trading out of the first round? Because if it was, then they wouldn't have gotten this or been risked not getting this guy. And if it's just if they were only going to go back a few more spots again, then they can hold their breath and see if they got him anyway.
Right. And I think it's hard because in this draft, even Dotson said he thought he'd go probably later in the first, maybe in the second. This is what he said. So, yeah, but I do think teams saw these guys very differently. I know there were some coaches who did not like Olave and Wilson because they didn't feel like they were physical enough for them. Those same coaches really liked Dotson, but there was one team that considered him the best of the second tier of the receivers, right? And there were some receivers, some who really liked Williams, but that knee was a big issue. And I kind of credit Detroit for taking him because they're the kind of team that can. They have time in their rebuild if they want to wait for a guy, and it could really pay off for them. But London was the guy that they really, I think, would have really stayed there for. But I was surprised with Olave that I knew. First of all, I know they liked him, but clearly they felt like there wasn't a big gap between he and Dotson because they wouldn't have traded, I don't think.
Yeah.
But, so I do like that they got the extra picks. As we've talked before, I think we talked today, earlier in the day, that one of the top things that you would like to have seen was adding more picks in this draft. And so that's where I would say, like, what's the best part of this deal? The fact that they get Dotson or the fact that they got more picks?
Well, we'll have to see with Dotson, obviously. Like, he needs to play like a first round pick. Hopefully that's what will happen. I do think they needed to get some assets back because I think what's interesting about being there at 11 and kind of being in this sweet spot where trades finally did start happening. It was funny if you watch tonight. I've never seen the top 5 picks go in so fast, and we didn't even know in what order they were going to go. It's because those teams got 0 phone calls to move up to go get these people. So it was, we're going to take this guy or this guy, and that's it, period. And the draft was moving. And then all of a sudden it hit the point where now people were comfortable to make moves and do stuff. And Washington was sitting in this sweet spot all along. But the reality was, like, we couldn't really forecast what they were going to do because they have a lot of needs and they have a lot of ways that they could go. And there were a lot of things that were there. And there was part of me that was surprised they passed on Kyle Hamilton because he's one of those people that I think it would have been a home run for the fan base to hear his name because they'd heard his name a million times. There were people that were projecting him much higher until he posted a couple slower speeds. But that said, like, they've decided they needed to get playmakers on offense. They've been telling us this. Some of us, they're just putting up a smoke screen. No, they weren't. They were telling us this is what they were going to do, and they went and did it.
Yeah, and that's because, he kept saying there's a couple of things he said recently too. One was that, you got to protect the quarterback and you got to surround him with playmakers. The other thing he said is when they were in Carolina, I know people hate when he says that, but it is what's referenced a lot. So there you go. But when they were there and they went to that Buffalo nickel, they also sometimes would use a linebacker in that role. So that was another clue that they didn't have to take a safety for that role, meaning they didn't have to take Hamilton to fill that role. There are linebackers and other safeties they like who could be there in the second and third rounds now that they can fill that role with. So that was another tip off where, like, I felt like he was kind of saying we don't have to take Kyle Hamilton there if he's there for, us, if that's how, that's how he's saying it. So, I like Kyle Hamilton a lot.
Yeah, no, I think there's what I think should be illuminating to really everybody is they do have a lot of needs here. And like none of these things, with the exception of it just didn't play out this way because Stingley and Sauce Gardner went so high that, like, I thought if they fell into their lap, that was going to be hard to turn down just because of the athleticism and the ability that was there. But they didn't have to make that decision because the guys were off of the board. But outside of that, there were no picks that we talked about openly that I felt were not something that was necessary. Is receiver the top priority that was necessary? Maybe in their eyes it is, but I didn't see it that way. Still, I do know that they need another one for sure. I do know they need another safety. I do know they could probably use help at corner. I do think they need help in the interior offensive line. I think there's a lot of ways they could have gone here. And I think that's what's really illuminating. I think probably for everybody, it's that the reason why this was, hard to project what they were going to do and why it shouldn't have been a surprise that they wanted more assets is I think they know that they have a lot of holes to fill too here.
They do. And because like I said, it's like you just said, interior line. And again, it could be, even though we keep saying they need a safety, it's a linebacker could fill that role too. So a guy like Troy Anderson, for example, from Montana State, who has played multiple positions, has the athleticism to fill a dual role, he would fill that role as well. Then you need a backup safety still. So there are backups in depth they need in some of those areas. So I think that's something that, was evident, but that's why and the other thing too, and I know there was some talk, and this came up in the press conference with Mayhew and Rivera about the value chart. And I think if you look at the old value chart, I don't think they got necessarily the value and people don't always go, it doesn't always equal that way. But I think the one thing it's with this draft that you have to take into account is those middle rounds are really strong.
Yeah.
I think probably stronger than they've been in a while. So that value chart may not apply quite the same as it would have in a normal year, because as they pointed out, and I mean, we've talked about this. This isn't like saying this in hindsight. This was the areas where you needed to get more picks. So the value in there might be greater than it is in other years.
Well, they got what they wanted and then got 2 more picks and not low picks. So, it's hard to argue with it. That said, I mean, if you really want to like try to nitpick them of the offseason, if they didn't get the value you think they should have gotten for this one, there are people that would say also that like they overpaid for Carson Wentz,
Right.
like,
Absolutely.
so, there are, but I think every front office you could do this with if you really wanted to and make some decisions. And, there are probably people in New Orleans that are sitting there going, wait a minute, you moved up to get a guy when there's 5 other receivers that you could have fell in your lap, like including maybe Olave. So, this could go both ways, really.
What do you think of Dotson, the player, then?
So I think he has the propensity to make incredible catches.
Yeah.
I need to be frank, he wasn't on much of my radar, because it's just not the names I was hearing at 11 for them at all. And you maybe heard more of it, but like
I definitely heard
that name never came up as someone that
not
was
at 11 though.
At 11.
Every time I heard his name, it was
so
back.
I was very focused on the 2 corners, the potential of one of those tackles slipping out into the 11 spot, and then they have to think about that. And that didn't happen, obviously. Kyle Hamilton. So I haven't watched him a lot, but I will say, like, clearly he's got the big play propensity that they're looking for. He looks like he's got incredible hands. And so I think this is going to be, I'd probably, let's revisit this in 24 hours when I mainline him over the next, couple of days and kind of get to know him a little bit better.
And I think, and I don't know what the fan reaction necessarily is. I'm going to guess they weren't all that thrilled with it because
I think they were surprised, but I mean, the reality was that a receiver was probably going to be taken by them very early. They've kind of made that clear. So this just wasn't a name that was circulated very much. And I think so it came as a surprise. And then the immediate reaction is always like, well, who's that guy? Well, he might end up being really good. Like these people are paid to study these guys. Just because me and you didn't circulate his name a million times, that's not the Commanders' fault. You know what I mean?
Well, and right. And like I said, I mean, whenever I'd hear him, it was always in relation to trading back. I never thought they'd take him at 11, but I did know that he was one of the 4 guys, and I tried to always mention him, but I think his name would get lost. It's almost like, and there's Jahan Dotson if they trade back.
If they trade back.
back. And so, that's why when they traded back, I thought he would be the target. And certainly when they pick him up, if they weren't going to trade back again, which they did have offers to do so. They had Martin Mayhew said they had like 3 offers while he was on the phone to trade back again. And they didn't want to take the chance of losing him. Some of the things I like about this guy is, first of all, he can return punts too, if they wanted to do that. Rivera compared him to his ability to make some big plays and contested catches down the field to Deshaun Jackson. And he has some Steve Smith in him. Those are pretty lofty compliments because those 2 are great receivers. But
Two very different receivers too, by the way, which I heard. I saw that quote too, and I was like, I hope he's either one of them. And if he's a combination of both, he's a Hall of Famer. So, I hope that's true. But Deshaun Jackson is a classic all-time incredible speed receiver who made incredible catches at full speed, which is
right.
For people who don't watch it closely enough, that is a rare trait, is what separated Deshaun Jackson. Not only that he was so fast, but he could not slow down a tick and make catches. And it's what made him so devastating as a player. Steve Smith was, even for his size, an extraordinarily physical player. Deshaun was never a physical player. Deshaun went out of his way to avoid contact at all costs, right? At all costs. So I heard that quote and I was like, boy, I hope he's right, because if that's a combination of the 2, that's going to be the great. That's like, it's a little Tyreek Hill-ish if that's what it ends up being.
And also Deshaun was more explosive. Deshaun was excellent at separating down the field. So he would run at about 6.8 speed and then separate at the end. And I don't know that, I'm not going to assign that to Dotson at this point, but I do think that Dotson can be a playmaker in multiple ways for them. And one of the things that Rivera pointed out, there are a couple of things that he pointed out that I thought were interesting. One, the ability that he, even though he's only like 5'10 and a half, 5'11, he has a wider catch radius. So with Carson Wentz, that's why I always like Drake London for them, a big guy with a wide catch radius. I think you need that with Wentz. It helps him. The other thing that they said they liked, that when you look at the Ohio State receivers, because you have Wilson, Olave, you have a quarterback who may go top 10 next year. You have another receiver there, Jackson Smith and Jigba, who may, if he comes out next year, he'd be a top 10. He could be a top 10 guy. You had Jamison Williams, who transferred out of there. So the point is, how can you, like, they have a tight end who's going to go in the third or fourth round, who would probably be a better tight end in the NFL than he was in college. So there's all this talent around them. So it's hard to sometimes tell exactly what can they do in certain situations. Whereas with Dotson, they felt like, and first of all, again, I know they liked Olave, but with Dotson, they felt like, here's a guy, same with London, where he didn't have a lot of help around him. And he was a focal point of defenses and was making plays. Wasn't playing with a great quarterback. Was out there making plays. So
I think that matters too. I think it needs to be pointed out that, and I've heard this a lot, in the last hour. Everybody is pointing out that Penn State did not have the best quarterback play.
They did not.
And, those two receivers at Ohio State, the two receivers at Ohio State have had consistent, really high level quarterbacking for some time now. And that does make a difference. It's not to take anything away from either one of them. Of those two, I like Olave too. Like, I just think he's an extremely smooth player. And if that's the way they went, I don't think that would have been wrong either.
And I like Garrett Wilson a little bit more, but I know why they liked Olave. I know that they liked at the pro days how he was when it wasn't his rep. For example, that he was always going back into line at the same time. So he was always sixth in line, whereas not everybody maybe was. And he was, the way he ran back to the line after his rep, to maintain a consistency, his sharpness in the route. So I know why they liked him. I liked Wilson. I've been watching him. I liked Wilson a little bit more. But Dotson, I do like. I do think he offers something, but I'm not like, you can't go into the season thinking, oh, this guy's going to be awesome. I don't know that. I know that I like some of what his skills are. I know that I know there's going to be questions about his strength, and I think that will be, and I think the questions for Olave were the same. His play strength isn't what some teams would have liked. This is why you can't make a big deal about some of these top 30 visits. He didn't do that. He met with these guys, I think it was one time, maybe one other time. And he said he didn't feel like he was on their radar because he didn't hear from them. But
I've heard that story a million times.
Right.
I've heard that a million times, where guys are like, I didn't even know they liked me. And that seems to be like, it's almost like, we better not show that we like them because this means it's going to give away what our intentions are.
This is smokescreen season. And I, we all know that. And I also think, like, in some cases you get to, you have, as Rivera will say, you get your questions answered. Now you're done. You like the guy, you like what you have, you got enough information on him, you can move on and focus on others to see how they may fit for you. So that's also part of it. But, I do think the kid can be a playmaker. The other part that I like by going receiver, whether or not he works out, but by going receiver, you can run more 4 receiver sets and you can diversify this offense a little bit more. And, the one thing that Rivera pointed out again, that he can go between the hashes somewhere where Adam Humphries did well for them. Mm-hmm. And that it's another area of the field they feel like they can now attack with Carson Wentz. So, and they gave him, so there is that too.
The other, thing here too, that I do like what's happening here with all of this is they did need some explosiveness that kind of wasn't there opposite of McLaurin, but what they are building, and I'm hoping Dotson, that the one thing that I see immediately with his hands in contested catch situations is they have a lot of guys now that are really reliable in one-on-one contested catch situations. Right. McLaurin is outstanding at it. Cam Sims is outstanding at it.
Yeah, I hope
Cam Sims, I think, has, and Rivera said this, and I'm not saying he should be playing a ton more, but I think they didn't utilize him enough. And I think they know that. And so I think there's a realization that should happen. When Logan Thomas is healthy, terrific in contested catch situations. Like they got guys who are going to fight for the ball. This is the part where Diami Brown's going to, he's going to have to win a job now.
Yeah.
Frankly.
No, he's got to play better.
Like we got a first round pick as a receiver. Curtis Samuel's coming back, assumed. Terry McLaurin's about to get, paid as a franchise player. Cam Sims a lock because of his size and what he's done for them and proven so far as, the guy on the back end of it. Diami Brown's going to be fighting for a job all of a sudden this year.
Well, he'll be on the roster, but he's got to fight for his role because they like him.
Fight for a role. I mean, right now, to me, he's 5th or 6th on the depth chart. Like that. That's where he's sitting right now. So he's going to be fighting.
He's got to play better. There is no doubt. If he does, it gives them another fast guy that you can put out there. But Cam Sims to me has always kind of been the guy that gets last year in camp, he was out there starting for most of camp until they put Diami Brown at one point, and then we're not going to see Cam a lot again. And then he comes back in it whenever he does, and he makes plays. So I'd like to see him get more reps because I do think with Wentz, you want some of those big receivers, and they need that in this offense because they don't have it. So I think he adds something of value. But I like that they can diversify this offense a little bit more now with Dotson, and we'll see where they go because they still need, again, as we've talked, they need offensive line help. So in the second rounds 2 and 3 on Friday, get some O-line help, get a linebacker or a safety to man that big nickel. And even if you don't get a linebacker for that, you still got to get one at one point because you don't have enough, And so
I agree. I have a feeling, though, after hearing Rivera say we're keeping it in mind that we're getting more things for Carson Wentz, that he means offensive line to protect him.
Oh, definitely.
So I am anticipating that either the second or just newly acquired 3rd round pick is used on an interior offensive lineman.
Yeah.
Period.
So, I guess we can sum it up here with, do you think they're now just, does Dotson make them better? Do you feel like you can say that? Here's the other thing, Bram. Too many people are thinking Jahan Dotson, Josh Doctson. They're not the same player. But
that's ridiculous. Yeah.
But it is. It became a thing on social media.
Well,
do you feel good that they have improved themselves tonight?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I think it was a surprise for sure. I hope it is I hope the end result is, because I did want them to get more picks, unless for some reason, for some reason, Evan Neal or Stingley or Gardner are there, like some freak, where you're like, you can't pass him up, just take him, unless that happened. I really felt like the best way for them to go was to trade down if someone was going to call and do it. And they got what they were looking for. They got more picks. They need it. Hopefully they can go find some of the other positions they need. I think it is, and maybe this is everybody, but it really feels like present right now, just thinking about their roster. It feels like, I don't know, after last year when they had so much, it felt like depth, that they needed to add something specifically quarterback, and they addressed that. But it does feel like a lot of the depth has been kind of eradicated here in specific spots, like interior defensive line, interior offensive line. And because of that, it's feeling like, to me, without knowing what I don't know yet, because they've been good on the second wave of free agents in both of their years of finding people that work for them at a cut rate. So I don't want to call the off season, over. I need to see the finished product, but still it does feel like we are bracing for, there's going to be another off season that's necessary to get all of the things together, hopefully at the same time. That's how it kind of feels to me right now.
There will always be needs, though.
Yeah, there will always be needs, but there does feel like, what are they doing about interior offensive line? What are they doing at Buffalo nickel? What are they doing at safety? Do they have enough corner help? Shouldn't they get another running back?
D-line.
Who's the developmental quarterback? There's a lot if you really think about it. And so
there's a lot of the depth stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Absolutely.
And I think we know, and they learned this last year because they were one of the unlucky teams getting a lot of injuries. If you don't have it, you're not going to be competitive. And I think their depth actually showed out last year. It kept them competitive until the COVID stuff happened in December, and their roster was gutted, and there was just nothing and they were playing teams that were going to make the playoffs. There was just nothing they could do at the end of the year to be competitive in the way that they wanted to. Putting that stuff aside, they had a ton of injuries to starters in the middle of the year, and the depth stood up and stood out for them at center, at guard, all of those places where they had massive injuries, and they're down to third, fourth center, second, third guard, moving people around. That stuff showed up for them to keep them competitive and help them turn their season around. I don't right now see the same level of depth on either side of the line. And that's where I think that needs to be addressed. So I'm reserving, this is done because they still have 6 rounds of the draft and this second wave of free agency to try to rectify a lot of this stuff. So I want to see what the finished product is, but it does feel like there is more than I expected to have to fill right now as we sit here and talk today.
It is, which is why that we kept talking. They've got to get more picks in that 2 to 4 range because, like I'd always say, like, they could address this position in those rounds. Next thing you know, you'd be talking about 5 positions and they only had 2 picks. So right. You do have to address safety, slack, and or linebacker. Get with maybe another running back there. Definitely offensive line. At some point, I would like them to add interior D-line help to develop in case in case they lose a Daron Payne.
Well, they don't have a choice now with no Ioannidis, no Settle, and Payne going into the last year of his contract and feeling like, right, as we sit here today, who knows, but it feels like last year of his deal. There better be somebody on the roster that they're developing and thinking about to be playing next to John Allen in 2023 for sure.
They don't have it. Last thing, should they have taken Jameson Williams? Would you have taken him at 11? Or would you like trading back and getting Dotson in the picks?
So I put in, I tweeted out today, I'm like, this is the order of outcomes that would make me happy. And I put Kyle Hamilton first. So, and you were talking me off of this all along as you're like, they're taking a receiver. Yeah. And I'm like, well, I still think you change your mind when specific people just kind of fall in your lap and he had fallen in their lap.
I like Kyle Hamilton.
Yeah. And, but clearly they didn't love him enough to do it. And because if they were thinking they were going to get him second go around, that blew up in their face, but obviously they didn't, they could have taken him. So, should they have taken Jameson Williams? That's a really interesting question. Like I put in my priority of outcome, I said, Kyle Hamilton, if not trade down, like assuming that one of these freaky players isn't for some reason available, just trade down. And if no one wants to trade with you, number 3 on my list was take Jameson Williams. Because I think there is a high end there that feels very Jamar Chase, feels very, special player. But being that Ron Rivera is saying he's not put himself on the hot seat, but he is reiterated over and over. He understands things need to kind of ramp up to the point where they're winning a little bit more. Boy, that is a tough thing to do to yourself, is pick somebody who is definitively not going to be ready in training camp or playing in week 1. And you're telling yourself, and it might be week 4, week 6, or next year, he's going to be great. And to not know that, I just think the time, I guess, for this, or he wasn't the right guy at the right time for this organization. I think he's the right guy for another organization like Detroit that can take him and go, you know what? Like, we got plenty of time to wait out to get this guy healthy, and it's not a rush. And I don't feel like they're not presenting themselves, the Commanders, as a team that feels like they have all the time in the world.
No,
and I don't think that they do. I think they have more time than they're suggesting, but I hear them and I agree that they better have players that can play. And if you watched what the Giants got tonight and you see what the Eagles just did, I think you have to feel like you need to have guys you can rely upon. And this guy's going to play. That guy, who knows what his future is, at least for this season.
And I think the other concern with him is this: how stable will that knee be? Will it become an issue down the road as well? So if you have concerns about that, it's then hard to not only wait for him, but then cross your fingers every time he's out there. So that's the part I don't know, but I know that was a concern of some teams going into this with him. But I credit Detroit because they are in a position, if it hits, it's a really good pick for them. Yes. And they're not in a position.
But if it doesn't, it's their front office has to explain why they used a first round pick on a guy who never played, like that. So there's a double-edged sword here. And, their fans don't want to hear it, that they've stunk forever. They want to think that the team for some reason is going to make picks that are going to make them better. So I, from the outside looking in, think it's a risk worth taking for them. And I felt like for us, it's a risk worth taking with the caveat of, it's not the right time for sure to do something like that. Like, it's just, it's so funny where we are that anybody would take someone who tore their ACL 2 months ago in the first round of the NFL draft. Like that's
how special
crazy that we're in a different time now. Typically, if something like that happened in the past, well, that guy'd go in the 4th round and then he'd be the steal of the draft, in 2 years when he starts playing. I just don't think this team right now at this point feels like it has the time to do something like that. And they decided they wanted to make their roster of receivers more explosive now, not in 2023.
There you go. Bram, be fun to see what they do the next couple days, and hopefully they can give us a few more guys to talk about. So thanks a lot for coming on.
All right. See ya.
That's it for this episode. Thanks to Bram for joining me, and thank you, as always, for listening. I'll be back with another episode wrapping up the draft on Sunday. We'll talk to you next time.